With the fall of a huge amount of snow, the first prolonged frosts come. Nature puts on a white coat in winter. Snow covers flowering meadows. Trees dress up in lush white outfits. Winter nature is quiet as never before. Only rare singing of winter birds can be heard. I finally woke up from a long sleep. It's a beautiful day, I thought. Emptying a glass of warm milk, I began to dress. I had a long trip to my beloved and only grandmother. I spend all my weekends at her place. My grandmother is small in stature, full-figured, with veins on her arms. Her facial features are expressive, correct, clearly defined. They show that she used to be a real beauty. After a long and somewhat torturous journey, I finally reached her 9-story apartment building. Grandma lived on the 6th. Stepping into the entryway, I went to the elevator and pressed the call button. Suddenly, I realized that it wasn't working. Maybe because the button wasn't being pressed. Oh well, a run up the stairs is always a good idea. Having already passed 5 floors of dark and unlit square stairs, I noticed a dark and skinny silhouette standing just above a few steps by some apartment. Slowing down my already slow step, I continued on my way, and as I passed the man, he suddenly grabbed me by the hand. I was afraid to try to break free, but a quiet and calm voice extinguished the feeling of fear and anxiety. "I apologize, I need to make a phone call," the stranger said without any agitation, and immediately continued. "The thing is that my door is slammed. My little daughter is in the apartment, and I am very nervous." "Yes, of course," I answered as politely as possible. I started to reach for the phone, but the stranger kept holding my hand as if afraid that I would run away. When I took out the phone, I gave it to the stranger, after which he immediately began rapidly poking at the keypad of the cell phone. The glowing backlight shone exactly in the stranger's face, so I was able to see his face more clearly. He was a man in his 40s, of median height, pleasant looking, with eyes as dark as tar. He continued to press the keys rapidly. I couldn't help but notice the length of time the number had not yet been dialed. He was tapping as if he were dialing an infinite number of digits in an infinite set. Finally pressing the green button, he put the phone to his ear. To my great surprise, I heard a quiet voice on the other end of the line. "Hello," the man said in reply. "I need Masha, my daughter." With a tremor in his voice, said the man. A minute later, the stranger with joyful, and at the same time with crying eyes, said, "Hello, my little one. How are you there?" He said it like he was about to cry. After hearing all that, I was puzzled by the question. Who's he even calling? At first, I thought the man wanted to call someone who had a key to the apartment, someone in the family. Now it looked like he was calling his daughter. Why not ask her to open the door from the inside? After a couple more minutes, he said goodbye and handed the phone back to me with trembling hands. I started to walk up the stairs as I heard the sound of a knob being turned. Turning around, I saw the man calmly open the door of his apartment and walk in. Not understanding anything, I came close to my grandmother's door. Knocking, I opened it and quietly entered. The room was dead silent. The light smell of incense tickled my nostrils. "I'm here," I shouted. There was no reply. It was strange my grandmother could barely move her legs, and the elevator was out of order. She couldn't have walked up 6 floors, could she? I did a quick sweep of the rooms. First I checked the bedroom, then I went into the bathtub. What I saw there shocked me. Grandma was lying on the floor. My heart suddenly started pounding frantically. I was confused. Running up to her, I tried to bring my grandmother to her senses, but in vain. Taking out my cell phone, I called an ambulance. 20 minutes later, the paramedics arrived. After examining my grandmother, they decided to take her away. They put her on a stretcher and started carrying her out of the house. Accompanying them, we went downstairs and went outside. Grandma was placed in the car. "She will be fine," the doctor said in a calm tone. "Leave us your contacts and we will call you," continued the man in the white coat. Having fulfilled the doctor's request, the ambulance started and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, a young man ran out of the entryway screaming for help. "The man is bad. Up there, help him." Barely breathing, shouted the guy. "What kind of day is it today?" grumbled the driver. I was unable to speak, watching the process. The medics hurried upstairs, and I stayed downstairs. After a short time, a man was brought out from behind the door. A little closer to me, I saw the same stranger who lived on the 5th floor. After loading him into the car, the paramedics finally left. It was just the two of us. Me and the guy who called for help. "Hey, who's going to watch his daughter?" "I think her name is Masha," I started. "He doesn't have a daughter anymore. She was hit by a car 2 months ago," the kid answered. "No, I heard him calling her and talking to her." I objected. "After the incident, he went crazy. He allegedly calls his daughter to the other world and talks to her." After he finished, the guy hurried upstairs. I came to my senses, called a cab, and went home. When I got home safely, I took off my shoes and went to bed. After lying down for a while, I dozed off. I was awakened by the loud ringing of my cell phone. I picked up the phone and heard my grandmother's warm voice. "Hi, grandson." My grandmother greeted me. "Grandma," rejoicing at her condition, I shrieked. "I'm sorry I did this to you. I will miss your visits." With a tremor in her voice, she said. "What are you talking about? You'll get better, and I'll visit you again on weekends," I replied with surprise. "You don't understand," she said. "What?" I exclaimed. "I do not have time to talk. Come to the city hospital, and you will understand everything. Goodbye, my golden one." "Already crying," said grandmother. I did not hesitate to put on my coat and jumped out into the street. I stopped a cab and went to the hospital. 15 minutes later, I burst into the room and approached the duty officer. "Hello," the girl behind the counter greeted me kindly. "There was an admission to you this morning." A grandmother in her 70s, and with her a man in his 40s. Without saying hello, I began. "Oh yes, my deepest condolences, but both people were dead on admission. Unfortunately, we lost your contacts and couldn't inform you in time about." I didn't finish listening to her and went outside. Taking out my phone, I started looking at the list of incoming and outgoing calls. Scrolling down a bit, I found similarities between the numbers. An incoming call to my grandmother and an outgoing call to a 40-year-old stranger. The numbers were the same. Without thinking long, I hovered my cursor over the suspiciously long number and pressed the call key. Leaning the phone to my ear, I heard a bloody hysterical laugh. It was getting stronger by the minute. I started to feel dizzy. I tried to hold myself together and kept listening to that infernal laughter. Then it stopped abruptly. On listening, I heard my grandmother's voice. It was a cold, moonlit night, and John was driving alone down a desolate stretch of highway. The fog hung low, casting an eerie glow on the road ahead. John had always been a believer in the supernatural, but he never imagined that he would experience something so chilling. As he drove further into the desolation, the road seemed to stretch endlessly into the abyss. The solitude was broken only by the occasional flicker of his car's headlights, revealing glimpses of gnarled trees and desiccated fields. The weight of the darkness outside pressed upon him, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Then in the distance, he noticed a figure at the side of the road, a hitchhiker. It was a woman in tattered clothes, her face hidden beneath a hood. John hesitated, but eventually pulled over to offer her a ride. She climbed into the back seat without a word, her silence unsettling. The woman's presence seemed to bring an unnatural chill to the car. The temperature dropped perceptibly, and John could see his breath in the frigid air. He tried to engage her in conversation, asking her name and where she was headed, but she remained unresponsive. Instead, she directed John to a remote, abandoned farmhouse down a winding, overgrown path. As they arrived, John's unease grew. The place seemed haunted, with broken windows and the remnants of a gruesome past. He asked the woman why she had brought him here, but she remained silent, her hood concealing her face. Suddenly, the atmosphere turned sinister. The woman's hood fell back to reveal a face twisted with malice. Her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly malevolence as she lunged at John with a wicked grin, revealing a gleaming knife. Panic surged through him as he fought desperately to escape the car. In the struggle, John managed to break free and sprinted into the night, his heart pounding. He could hear the woman's deranged laughter echoing behind him, chilling him to the bone. He stumbled upon a nearby farmhouse, its lights flickering in the darkness. Desperate for help, he banged on the door until it creaked open. A kindly elderly couple, the Smiths, greeted him with concern. John quickly explained the terrifying encounter, and the Smiths phoned the police. Within minutes, sirens pierced the night, and officers arrived at the abandoned farmhouse. The police found no trace of the mysterious hitchhiker, but they did discover evidence of a violent struggle inside the car. They questioned John extensively and searched the area, but the woman had vanished without a trace. Despite their best efforts, the identity of the woman and her sinister motives remained a mystery. John was left traumatized by the chilling encounter, forever haunted by the night he picked up a hitchhiker with a secret as dark as the foggy highway. As John drove away from that forsaken place, he couldn't help but wonder if he had narrowly escaped becoming another victim in the hitchhiker's twisted game. The memory of that night would haunt him for the rest of his days, a constant reminder that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are found in the real world. The chilly encounter left John with sleepless nights and a sense of dread that lingered in every shadow. He became obsessed with unraveling the mystery of the hitchhiker, spending countless hours scouring the internet for similar stories and supernatural explanations. His search led him down a rabbit hole of folklore and urban legends, each one more unsettling than the last. One story that particularly caught his attention was about a malevolent spirit known as the hitchhiking phantom. According to the legend, this vengeful entity would appear as a seemingly helpless traveler, only to reveal its true ghastly form when offered assistance. It was said to be a harbinger of doom, preying on those who dared to show kindness to strangers on desolate roads. Haunted by the possibility that he had encountered this very entity, John delved deeper into the lore. He consulted with paranormal experts, psychics, and even sought out local historians who might have knowledge of the area's dark history. However, all his efforts yielded more questions than answers. In the midst of his investigation, John's life began to unravel. He struggled to maintain his job as the fear and paranoia from that fateful night consumed him. He pushed away friends and family, unable to share the horrifying truth of his experience without being labeled as insane. The memory of the hitchhiker's malevolent face haunted his every waking moment. One particularly harrowing night, John had a vivid nightmare. He dreamt of the abandoned farmhouse, but this time it was engulfed in flames, with eerie laughter echoing from within. The hitchhiker stood at the center of the inferno, her eyes fixated on him. He woke up in a cold sweat, the sensation of burning heat still lingering on his skin. Determined to confront his demons, John decided to return to the site of the encounter. With trepidation, he drove back to the desolate stretch of highway and found the overgrown path leading to the farmhouse. The place was as eerie as ever, but this time he was prepared. Armed with a flashlight and a crucifix, John cautiously entered the dilapidated building. The air inside was heavy with the stench of decay, and the walls seemed to close in on him. He made his way through the dark corridors, his heart pounding with each creaking floorboard. As he ventured deeper into the house, he discovered a hidden chamber, concealed behind a false wall. Inside, he found a collection of old journals and newspaper clippings. The writings spoke of dark rituals, sacrifices, and the summoning of malevolent entities. It seemed that the farmhouse had once been a site of unspeakable horrors. Among the documents, one name stood out: the hitchhiking phantom. It appeared that the entity had been summoned by a group of occultists decades ago, and its malevolence had been unleashed upon unsuspecting travelers ever since. John's discovery sent shivers down his spine. He realized that the hitchhiker had been more than a mere spectre. She was a manifestation of pure evil, bound to the cursed farmhouse. Armed with this newfound knowledge, he sought the help of a local priest to perform an exorcism on the abandoned property. The exorcism was a harrowing ordeal, filled with unearthly screams and violent disturbances. But ultimately, the priest's prayers and rituals succeeded in banishing the malevolent entity from the farmhouse. As the darkness lifted, the sense of dread that had clung to John for so long began to dissipate. With the curse broken, the abandoned farmhouse stood as a sullen, empty structure, no longer a haven for supernatural horrors. John finally felt a sense of closure and relief, knowing that he had confronted the darkness that had haunted him for so long. As he drove away from the forsaken place for the final time, John couldn't help but reflect on the journey he had undertaken. He had faced the very embodiment of his deepest fears and emerged victorious. The memory of that moonlit night would never truly fade, but he had reclaimed his life from the clutches of the supernatural. In the end, John's story served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that there are mysteries in the world that defy explanation and dangers that lurk in the shadows. And while he may never fully understand the true nature of the hitchhiker, he had learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon against the unknown is the courage to confront it head-on. The narrator, Alex, recollects a disturbing event that took place during a sleepover with his cousins in June 2019. They were celebrating Alex's 13th birthday and had planned to have a fun night out. After hours of playing video games, indulging in junk food, and sharing laughter, they decided to cap off the night with an exhilarating game of manhunt in the vast backyard of Alex's house on a stormy night. They divided into two teams, with Alex and Ethan hiding first. As they crouched behind a shed, Alex noticed a figure in dark clothing sprinting toward the nearby woods and assumed it was Ethan making a break for it. However, when Ethan unexpectedly emerged from beneath the deck, it dawned on Alex that an intruder had infiltrated their game. Panic set in, and they immediately called off the game, fleeing into the house. Alex's parents happened to be out of town that night, so they locked themselves inside his parents' bedroom. Strange, unsettling noises echoed from downstairs, and when the intruder made an attempt to enter their room, he burst into maniacal laughter that sent shivers down their spines. Fear coursing through their veins, they swiftly dialed 911. Ethan, gripping a screwdriver he had found in the room, prepared to defend them. As the intruder relentlessly tried to force his way into the room, Ethan acted on instinct, thrusting the screwdriver at the intruder's forearm. The intruder let out a painful yelp, giving them the chance to break free and escape to a neighbor's house. The police responded promptly, apprehending the intruder. Alex and his cousins were finally safe. To this day, Alex regards that night as the most harrowing experience he and his cousins have ever endured. The narrative shifts to Alex lingering unease whenever he visits his grandparents' home and the unsettling memories that continue to haunt him. Years had passed since that nightmarish incident, but the memory of it clung to Alex like a stubborn shadow. Even now, whenever he found himself at his grandparents' house, a sense of discomfort and foreboding crept over him. His grandparents lived in a charming, albeit somewhat eerie, Victorian-era mansion nestled in the heart of a quaint, isolated town. It was a place where time seemed to have stood still, and the past exuded an uncanny presence. The dark wooden beams, creaking floors, and dimly lit corridors all contributed to the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the house. Alex's unease wasn't solely due to the house itself. It was also the haunting memories of that fateful sleepover. The incident had occurred at his parents' home, but the trauma had somehow extended its grasp to this place as well. He couldn't help but associate the two locations with fear and vulnerability. As he roamed the old, echoing halls of his grandparents' house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous lurked in the shadows. Every distant creak of the floorboards, every flickering of a candle's flame, seemed like a subtle reminder of that terrifying night. His cousins, Ethan and Emma, who had also been present during the ordeal, shared his unease. They rarely spoke of the incident, as if discussing it would give it even more power over them. Instead, they communicated their discomfort through nervous glances and strained smiles whenever they found themselves under the same roof. One evening, during a particularly stormy night reminiscent of that ill-fated birthday celebration, Alex decided to confront his fear head-on. He proposed a game of hide-and-seek in the sprawling, dimly lit mansion. Perhaps, he thought, facing the eerie atmosphere would help him exorcise the lingering specters of that traumatic night. Ethan and Emma hesitated at first, but eventually agreed, hoping that this would indeed help them overcome their shared dread. The game began, and as a seeker, Alex closed his eyes and counted to 50 while his cousins scattered throughout the house. The sound of rain pelting against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder provided an eerie backdrop to the game. As Alex commenced his search, the memories of that night resurfaced. He felt a chill run down his spine as he passed by the same rooms where they had once taken refuge. It was as if the walls themselves whispered the echoes of their fear and desperation. He'd found Ethan first, crouched in the corner of an old library. His face was pallid, and beads of sweat dotted his forehead. It was clear that Ethan, too, was grappling with the haunting memories. They continued the game, but it wasn't long before Emma's voice echoed through the house, trembling with fear. "Guys, I saw someone in the hallway. It's not one of us." Alex's heart raced, and a sense of déjà vu washed over him. He and Ethan exchanged alarmed glances before rushing to Emma's side. In the dimly lit corridor, they saw a figure clad in dark clothing, just as they had on that dreadful night. Panic surged within them, and instinctively, Ethan reached for a nearby candlestick, ready to defend themselves if necessary. The figure, however, turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows. The three of them rushed to the spot where the figure had stood, but there was no sign of their mysterious intruder. Had it been a person, or was their collective fear playing tricks on their minds? They decided not to find out. The game was abandoned and they huddled together, the weight of that night's events bearing down on them once more. The following morning, they confided in their grandparents about the strange occurrence. Their grandparents, too, were uneasy about the history of the house. They revealed that it had once been a refuge for travelers and had a long, dark history filled with eerie tales and inexplicable events. For Alex, Ethan, and Emma, this revelation only added to the enigma surrounding the house. They couldn't help but wonder if the past had a way of imprinting itself on the present, if the shadows of history could indeed come to life. From that day forward, they never dared to play games that echoed the past within those haunted walls. The memories of that terrifying night, along with the unsettling experience during their game of hide-and-seek, served as a stark reminder that some things were best left undisturbed. And so, the old mansion stood as a silent witness to the unexplainable, its dark corridors and echoing chambers harboring secrets that continued to elude their understanding.